Hey, good evening, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, I hardly know where to start about today. It has been, shall we say, a special day. So, I went for a walk this evening. Let's shoot through to the most interesting time. We had some time out. We went into Taliban and we spent some time waiting for everybody. Beth and I sat in the truck. It was pretty hot. It's been relentless. The heat has been relentless. While we were in the truck, it didn't seem so bad, and we were in the red, which is the tiny one. So we took everybody down there. We took Talik and Bibi, and we took Alfred and Talia, and we took Lena, and everybody had their own business to do. Alfred took a trip to the bank and came back saying that he was very frustrated. He said his words were, "You could go crazy in the bank." Well, yes, you could. So we got everybody back safely, and we're here, and we're all doing our various things, really interesting stuff. Like I took a nap, and when I got up, we had everybody had been doing all different ordinary things, all those ordinary things that you guys seem to like to read about, simple life. I never quite get why people are interested in very simple things. Maybe with OFWs, they are retro, they're taking a retro look at a time that they may have thought was full of deprivation and poverty, and yet they're seeing that it was the happiest time of their life. Now, a lot of people might look at the Filipino way of life and think that no, that was not a wonderful childhood, that was not the happiest time of anybody's life, they must be crazy. But I remember that when I used to go out on the motorcycle before we got trucks, I went out on the motorcycle, excuse me, and Talik would come with me, and that's when I learned my first phrase in Visayan. I asked Beth, I said, I'm curious as to whether Talik enjoys coming out with me on the bike. And so I said, how would I say, did you have fun? And Beth told me, Nalingao Baka. So when we'd been out and we went to Taliban or came back from a taffy or whatever it was, we would always stop at the little sari store and we'd have a drink and maybe an ice cream, and that was a treat. Maybe it was my bribe for when I actually said to her, well, Talik, Nalingao Baka. And she would say, well, I'd say, first of all, if you're a foreigner and you say something in Visayan, people don't listen to what you're saying, they listen to the fact that you're saying something. And then I would say, Nalingao Baka. And she'd say, yes. Well, of course, she said she's still digesting the ice cream. So, we all have these things that we enjoy, and having a simple life and reporting it now, chronicling that simple life, is something that people love. In British television, they are the masters at doing that. Well, they're the masters at doing brilliant comedy. They're the masters at brilliant eccentrics. The comedy is beyond criticism. It's beyond compare. It's just incredible. So very, very funny. But they also do mindless, almost real-time television accounts of a particular setting. And for my money, Crossroads was one. And in its level of boredom, it was mind-numbing. Another one which was full of ordinary people, was Coronation Street. And Coronation Street is probably bringing in repeats all over the world right now. I would love to have been the guy who composed the tune for that program, but I wasn't, so therefore I'm not filthy rich, because every time that program is called, Coronation Street is so famous, so popular, so it might still be running for all I know, but it was kind of ordinary life. What's the expression? About as interesting as watching paint dry, and yet they were immensely popular. And so I guess in a way that if you're watching our life, you will be looking at ordinary life. Someone that came and stayed with us, Johnny Peanut, who became like one of the family, said that our life was such that it should be, all of it should be on video, because something unusual was always happening. Well, I finally get to it. Here I am, finally get there. I went out for a short walk just before it started to get dark. The sun had gone down, but the sun was still in the sky, lighting up the sky. So there was time. I thought I'd go for a 10 or 15 minute walk. Well, I got about 6 or 7 minutes down the road, and coming towards me is Bibi's brother. Bibi's brother is named Akko. And when we approached, I said, "Hi, Akko." And something about the way that he was holding his left arm made me say, "Are you okay?" And he held his arm again. And when I looked at his arm, now, I don't pretend to be Superman with x-ray eyes, but it looked like a compound fracture to me. So he'd fallen out of a mango tree, and he'd walked about a mile to where he met me. So I said, "You've got to go to hospital, but first we've got to do something about that arm." So we were very short, within sight of Julio's house. So I said, "Go to Julio's house and stay there and wait for me, and I'll be back for you." I ran up, I got Beth, I told her, "There's a break, we need something for a splint, and we need a elastic bandage." So we found those. I made a splint with some very stiff cardboard, which I broke into a shape like this. And what you do is you make that shape so it's like that, okay, by bending it, and then you put it on the arm like that, and then you bind it with the elastic bandage. So I go up, I get him, we do that. We didn't come out with any money, so we know if we go to the hospital we need money, so we have to reverse and drive back to the house. We get the money, then everybody is in on the act. Nanai wants to come out and see it, and the brother of Akko comes out, and in the end it's declared that, and now we're going into Hilltop farmer response to a medical injury. That's what we're doing here. We're not talking about right and wrong, we're talking about what is. Now, what is for me was what I did to help. Now, I'm thinking that if you go to an emergency room, they're able to deal with an emergency. So there'll be a doctor on there who can set a brake. Now, I've looked at the arm, and I feel that I can see, just by the shape of it and how it's out of alignment, and he is holding it, he's just holding it like this, straight down his side, that it's a compound fracture. both bones. Try to explain to everyone there are 2 bones in the forearm, and that's why you can do that, because the bones can go around each other. If it was one solid bone, they'd have to have a really unusual ball joint at each end, which would be a lot more difficult to achieve. So I've got him strapped up. His arm is immobilized as per any first aid training. My first aid training is archaic, but I did learn when I was in my training for working in the coal mines, I did learn basic. You need to have basic first aid. You need to be able to set a splint. You need to be able to make a splint out of almost anything. And I made a splint out of a piece of cardboard that came in a heavy carton that was there from something that we bought. I cut a piece out long enough, about this long, and we did the splint and wrapped up, and now he's immobilized, and he can't actually move the part that is broken. So let's say that this is the break. The arm cannot move like that. It's rigid from here to here. Okay, so far so good. Now, it's put to me that Taliban will not have X-ray, plus they will not have a doctor that can handle the break. They'll need a bone doctor. Okay, so I'd never thought that Taliban would be able to handle it, and was prepared to drive the boy to Ubay, which is an hour and a half to 2 hours drive. Okay, we'll get him there. Apparently Ubay is no better off than Taliban, and they'll need a bone doctor, so there's no point in going them. So meantime, it's suggested that he go to the massage therapist, who is a self-taught therapist who can actually manipulate, certainly out of alignment bones, in the same way that very simple a chiropractic doctor would do. Now, I'm trying to explain that this is a compound fracture, and that any massage of such an injury would just be agony for no gain. It comes up against a brick wall, and this I'm giving this now as a kind of a lesson for anybody who is thinking about coming here, because it illustrates the degree of difference between a foreigner's thinking, whatever country you come from, a foreigner's thinking from the West, and the Filipino thinking, especially if you have joined a community of hilltop farmers, which is where I live. So I try to argue my point, I try to get over what I think is right, and in the end everybody is convinced that he should go to the chiropractor, massage therapist. So, okay, what can I do? I'm already mad as a hatter, so I say, okay, let's go. And we take him. Cut a long story short, the man sees him. He does. I couldn't bear to watch him do any massage or manipulation or whatever on what I believe is a compound fracture. We will see whether I'm right on this, by the way. Maybe I'm just being a bit of a know-it-all, or a lot of a know-it-all. The therapist removes the bandage, removes the splint, and when the boy comes out, he has what amounts to a sling, a support, and it's tied around the wrist. So if you're looking at it, the support is on this side of my compound fracture. So in other words, if you look at it, that this is part of the arm, this is supported, and this is where the break is. So it's supporting this, but he's removed the splint, and we never got the splint back. Apparently I wasn't there to say give me the splint, because I would have just put the splint back on. So now he's been massaged, cost 100 pesos or something, and we brought him home, and he'll sleep now with that. The lesson being, I think, that up to a certain point you can try to bring in what you know, and then you must respect the overall general consensus. Otherwise people just won't want you around. So if it was my arm that was broken, I would put my arm in a sling after I'd immobilized it, after I put a splint on. The idea of the splint is so that the bones are not moving independent of each other like this. I think if you have been watching us for a while, you'll see that we've fixed up a cat with a broken leg. We've fixed up a couple of puppies who had a defect of the ankle in the front legs, put them in splints. Our hiding cat who came home after being out on a sex tour in the area, and he dragged in a broken leg. One of his back legs was broken. I got a couple of little sticks like this of bamboo, shaved them down, put them either side of the leg. Hiding cat was incredible. He just seemed to know he was being helped. And then, believe it or not, with some bandage to keep it soft, we then put tape on it. This kind of tape, because otherwise he would have chewed it off in no time. And he recovered. He recovered because his leg was immobilized. Now you might also have watched when we were told that baby Jane, who is the child that has imperfecta, I think it's called. It's breaking she breaks bones easily, and at one point she had been trying out a skipping rope that we'd given the other kids, and she fell and broke her leg. Well, when I went to see, we were told that we just heard that she wasn't feeling that good, so we just stopped by to see what was happening. And sure enough, there's the kid. She is sitting there with a leg that has a compound fracture, and I could see it. There's something about a compound fracture that the limb on the end is sort of like this. I'm sure that there'll be nurses who are saying you need a little bit more than that, Terence, but I'm talking about going to see somebody in a nipa hut with a dirt floor who has taken a child, a 6 or 7 year old child with a compound fracture, to a massage therapist. I cannot even begin to imagine the agony that that child must have gone through when she had that treatment. So that was when I did assert some, it can't be authority because I didn't have any authority, but I picked the child up and said, she has to go to the hospital now. And we made it to the truck, And we made it to the hospital, and she was put in a cast, and she recovered, only to do it again. And the second time was at church, and once again we stepped out and said, sorry, she has to go to the hospital. And that's what we did. And she spent the entire Christmas, something like 2 or 3 weeks over the Christmas period, in hospital. I think that this was the Sunday before Christmas, and we drove her to Ubay, which is where I would have taken Akko, and which is where we will probably end up taking him tomorrow. Now, is everybody going to be happy about him going to hospital? I doubt it. Even Beth said, well, what are we doing tomorrow then? Are we going to see Mike and Bonnie? I said, no, we're going to the hospital, remember? And she said, well, shouldn't we just observe? What can you observe of a compound fracture? But we'll see. Another thrilling adventurous day in the Philippines. So stay with us and you'll find out what happened when we took him to the hospital. I'm sure the doctor there will say, well, did you take him to the therapist? Yeah. So this is A Foreigner in the Philippines. Bye for now.